welcome to Manifested Publishers. We continue with our topic, VAT administration, and to be very specific, we pick on restriction of input tax claimable. We had covered the introduction, that is obligations and penalties and offenses under VAT. We had also started on a build-up on computation of VAT. So we'll pick up on restriction and a few other areas, then we begin the computation. So we start with restriction of input VAT. And the first thing, where does it come from? Where do we have restriction of the input tax claimable? Basically, when we have sales that are exempt, but we cannot trace purchases that were sold as exempt, we basically do the restriction. So say this is used when the trader, we say when the trader, this is used when the trader is dealing with exempt. This is used when a trader is dealing with exempt. We say it exempt sales. A trader basically dealing with exempt sales. And when you say exempt sales, these are sales that are basically not chargeable to VAT. Sales that are not chargeable to VAT, but cannot distinguish, cannot distinguish, or separate, cannot distinguish goods sold, as exempt, cannot distinguish goods sold as exempt, when sold as exempt, when they were purchased. That is basically when we do the restriction. So we basically know that the total sales, we say that taxable supplies, we have taxable supplies. Taxable supplies in this case will be what we call standard rate sales plus the zero rated, plus what we call the zero rated. That the taxable supplies will basically be standard rate sales plus what we call the zero rated. Then we have what we call total supplies. When you talk about total supplies, in this case, total supplies would basically be equals to standard rate sales plus zero rated, then plus exempt sales. That will give us basically give us total supply. But when you talk about taxable supplies we have said is equivalent to standard rate plus the zero rate altogether. So that is what we call the term taxable supply. So when you're restricting the following, we need to understand the following method is basically applied to restrict. And why do we restrict? We are dealing with exempt sales, but we cannot distinguish goods that were sold as exempt when they were purchased. So basically we restrict. And how do we restrict? Before we talk about how do we restrict, we can get the percentage. You say that when you get the percentage of the exempt, when you say exempt over what you call the total supplies, over total supplies, exempt over total supply, times 100%. We get the percentages of exempt or out of the total supplies. Total supplies, we've said, is equivalent to standard rate plus zero rate plus exempt sales. So we basically say that if less than 10% do not restrict. Do not restrict. If it's less than 10%, 10%. We say above 10%, above 10%, we say we restrict. Above 10%, we basically say we restrict altogether. So how do we restrict? Restrict is what we call proportionate method. Restriction is also what we call proportionate method. We also call it what we call the proportionate method. So we restrict by saying that taxable supplies, we get the taxable supplies over what we call total supplies, over what we call the total supplies, over what we call total supplies, times the total input. We say we are restricting input, total input VAT, times what we call total input VAT. I have said that taxable supply is basically the standard rate sales plus zero rate together, plus zero rated sales. Then we have what we call total supply. We say the zero rated supplies plus standard rate plus exempt. And I've said that when you get exempt over the total supplies and you multiply by 100, if it's less than 10%, you do not restrict. Above 10%, we say that we restrict. And how do we restrict? Under the proportionate method, we say that taxable supplies, which is the zero rate plus the standard rate, over the total supplies, which is standard rate, zero rate plus exempt, times the total input VAT. And you need to understand that when you're restricting NB a number of times, learners forget when restricting, the standard rate sales should be exclusive of VAT. A lot of times learners forget that. When you are restricting, the standard rates sales should be exclusive of VAT. Should be exclusive of VAT, meaning if it's 116%, then you need to convert it to 100%, because the standard rate sales should be exclusive of VAT. The instance where we can actually trace purchases, the sales that were, we cannot trace purchases that were sold as exempt, In that method, we basically used what we call direct method, because we can easily trace the purchases that were sold as exempt.